let's talk Sarah J. Maas. Hi guys, welcome to today's video. I am Sarah and I would like to talk about all things Sarah J. Maas. So this is mainly going to be a reading order video because there's lots of questions as to how to read all of her books, when to read them, what order to read them in, and there's a lot of different ways. So I just want to talk about all the different ways that people read her books and why they read them like that so that you can decide for yourself what way you'd like to read them. First, I'm going to start with what I think is the simplest series in the series that I always think should be read first, and that is the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I feel like this is first and foremost the best series to start out as a beginner, either a beginner in fantasy or somebody who's never read one of Sarah J. Maas's books before. I would definitely recommend jumping in first with A Court of Thorns and Roses. And this series is also easy because there's no question in what order you should read these in. These should always be read in publication order. So it goes with A Court of Thorns and Roses, then A Court of Mist and Fury, then we have A Court of Wings and Ruin, A Court of Frost and Starlight, and then A Court of Silver Flames. I don't know why I blanked for a second. Yeah, this series is pretty simple. This is a high fantasy series. This takes place in a fae world. We're following our main character, Feyre, where she is basically kind of the breadwinner for her family, if you will. And she is basically hunting and stuff to provide her family food and clothing. And one day she's out in the forest and she shoots a wolf, and all of a sudden the Fae High Lord is breaking down her door and demanding that she has to stay with him basically forever in his kingdom, and that he's going to wipe the minds of her family so that they don't remember where she's actually gone, and that she's going to stay with him forever. That is just the very first intro into this world. Obviously, it goes a lot deeper. It has so much character growth, and it gets really crazy. So buckle up if you're going to jump into the series. It gets pretty crazy, and there's lots of yes, this is kind of romance heavy, but that isn't there. There's definitely a lot of plot in this book, or in this series, in these books. So it's not just about the romance, but I would say that this series is probably the heaviest in romance of all three. Okay, next we're going to talk about the Throne of Glass series. I am not holding these in order because there's so many of them that I am struggling to hold them all. But these are like way out of order right now. But now this is the series that everybody has the most trouble with, I will say, and the series that has the most controversy on what order this should be read in. And for me, I feel like there's many ways. They all make sense. I wouldn't say that you're wrong for reading them any specific way. I do have a way that I personally think is my favorite, but again, I think that it really should be left up to you and what you decide. So I'm just going to talk you through each of the different ways to read the series and let you make a decision on what you think. So the first method is basically the romantic version of reading this series, or that's what they call it, the romantic method, and that is starting with this book, The Assassin's Blade. So we have The Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and Heir of Fire. It is these 4 books that get swapped around often, and these are the 4 that everybody gets confused about. So here is the first method, and I've actually never read them in this order, but I know so many people who have, and so many people who swear by reading them in this order, and I will tell you why. So this first book takes place before the events of these books. So The Assassin's Blade is a book of a collection of novellas and short stories that take place before the events of Throne of Glass. Throne of Glass is technically like the first book in the series officially. It came out first. This was the first one to actually be published. This was actually originally not a full book at all. This was just a bunch of short stories that she wrote to give you a little bit more backstory on our main character, Celaena Sardothien. Now, the reason that people put it first, like I said, is because chronologically, this actually takes place first. All of the events in this book take place before Throne of Glass. So a lot of people feel like jumping into Throne of Glass without the previous knowledge of what happens in the Assassin's Blade is just out of order. They feel like you don't really care about Celaena very much. You don't understand her backstory. You don't understand why she is the way that she is. And they think that it's just out of order to read it like that. Now, the second order is reading Throne of Glass, then Crown of Midnight, then The Assassin's Blade, and then Heir of Fire. Now, this is the method that Sarah J. Maas herself recommends readers read. And this is my favorite method as well. I have read this series 2 different ways now, and I will get to the other way last. But this one is my favorite, and let me explain why this one is my favorite and why people read it this way. So, the first book that came out is Throne of Glass. Throne of Glass is a book about an assassin that is basically being, the very start of the book opens up, she is being taken from the prison mines of Endovir, which is the salt mines. It's a very, very, very serious prison camp, only for like the worst of the worst criminals, which Celaena Sardothien is known as one. She is like one of the world's worst assassins in this universe, and she's being transported from that prison to the king's palace, and the king wants her to basically partake in this really crazy challenge where he puts a bunch of assassins against each other, and the last to survive will be his champion and his personal assassin. But they basically don't want people to know how young she is and who she actually is, so they make her go by a different name. I think she goes by Lilith or something like that. Obviously, there's 8 books in this series, thousands of pages when you put these books combined. So I don't really remember like the exact details of Throne of Glass, but I will say I've read it twice, the whole series in general twice, and I'm on my 3rd read through. So this method is that you would read Throne of Glass and then the second book, Crown of Midnight, because Crown of Midnight just picks up right where we left off in Throne of Glass. I mean, it is like very, very soon after you're immediately jumping into Crown of Midnight. Now, at the end of Crown of Midnight, we get a huge cliffhanger and a huge gasp moment where it really changes how the rest of the series takes place. And so here is where you would go back and you would read her backstory that would help you understand more why the Crown of Midnight ended the way that it did. Right here is where you would get the most emotional impact reading her backstory, because now you already have these feelings about her to start with, and so when you go back and you read her backstory at this point, you care a little bit more about Celaena than you do if you read this first. So there is a definite emotional impact that hits when reading this third. Also, there is some really key characters and events that happen in Heir of Fire that you won't understand if you haven't read The Assassin's Blade. So I personally think that it is best to read The Assassin's Blade right before you get to Heir of Fire so that you can basically have those things and those people fresh on your mind before going into Air of Fire. Now, those are my two favorite methods. I would say one or the other, you can't go wrong either way. I really do love both ways. I understand both ways, but personally, this is my personal opinion, and it is 100% okay if you don't agree. But personally, I believe that as for a first-time reader, I really do think that you should read Assassin's Blade third in the series, only because really for maximum emotional impact, I really do think that it belongs best third. Then, if you're rereading the series, I think it's great to read it in all different orders and just kind of get that, but you'll never get to read it for the first time again. You'll never get to take in that information for the first time. And personally, I just think this is the best way. But yet again, I really don't think you can go wrong. I just want people to read the series. So if you're going to read it like this, where Assassin's Blade is first, you will still fall in love with the series no matter what. You're still going to love it anyway that you read it. So you really cannot go wrong any method. The third and final method is, again, you can't go wrong reading it anyway, but this is personally my least favorite. This is the way that I read it the first time I ever read this series, and I was very lost, and I just do not like reading it this way personally. And that is reading the Assassin's Blade fourth in the series. So it goes Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Air of Fire, then Assassin's Blade. I think the biggest reasoning for this method is because there's, like I said, there's a huge cliffhanger at the end of Crown of Midnight, and most of the time, I'm telling you right now, if you've not read the series, you're not going to want to go back and read backstory for 400 pages. You will want to jump in to Air of Fire immediately. You will want the answer to all of the questions swirling through your head at the information that gets dropped in the end of Crown of Midnight. It's a big deal. It quite literally changes the whole rest of the series. And it's really where the series starts to pick up. And so this method allows you to at least jump into Air of Fire, read through that, get some of your answers, and then jump back into the Assassin's Blade and read some of her backstory and have this fresh on your mind for the last 4 books of the series. Now, my biggest qualm with this version of reading this series is that there's some pretty important characters in Air of Fire that if you don't read the Assassin's Blade first, you will have no clue who they're talking about. You will be so lost. You have no idea. And then you read it after and you're like, oh my gosh, now everything makes sense. And that's because this was meant to be read before Air of Fire. Sarah J. Maas herself did put it in the reading order where it is third. So this is how she says it should be read. And personally, I really like to take the author's word. She wrote the series, and she has a way that she intended it to be read, and I think that it should be read that way. But really, the series is amazing. So just pick it up however you think you will enjoy it the best. I really do know a lot of people who swear by every method that I just named. So there really is a method for each person. And I think that that's just how it should be read. There is one more little caveat with this series, and that is when you get to these 2 lovely books. It goes the first 4 books, and then there's one more in between, that's Queen of Shadows, and then you get to these 2 books. This is Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. I just cannot get over how gorgeous the covers of these new books are. I have all of the original series in hardcover, and I literally had to buy all of the paperbacks because, first of all, I don't want my original copies to get damaged now that they are out of print, but also because can you just look at these covers and look how beautiful they are. So these 2 books, the fun part about these 2 is that these 2 books take place at the same exact time. Technically, the publication order is to read Empire of Storms and then Tower of Dawn, but they take place at the same exact time. So all of the events that are happening in this book are also happening in this book, but they take place from two different characters' point of views, and the character in Tower of Dawn is actually away. So he was with all of our main characters in Empire of Storms until the very beginning of this book, when he decides to leave and go to the Tower of Dawn to get healed by some magical healers. And so he gets his whole own story that takes place at the same time. We get to see what's happening with our main characters here, and also watch, I will say the main character's name in this book because it's not a spoiler. Actually, no, I'm not going to say it, just in case. I just think it's best not to say it. We also get to see a character in this book get his own point of view and his own story. And personally, so a lot of people really do not like Tower of Dawn. A lot of people think that it's really obnoxious to have to read it in between Empire of Storms and the final book, which is Kingdom of Ash. Personally, this is such an unpopular opinion. I loved Tower of Dawn. This is like one of my favorite books in the series. And I know a lot of people are going to be so blown away by that, because I have literally barely ever heard a positive thing about this book. But the thing is, I love watching character growth. I love seeing a character that we don't particularly love get put in a new light, so that maybe we do start to understand why they are the way that they are. I really appreciated this story. There was so much character growth. We got to see some characters that we don't typically get a lot of spotlight on. I really loved it. Plus, there's a connection in this book from the very start of the series that is just beautiful, and I love that story arc. That is one of the little minuscule threads that is woven in through the entire series, and I just love it. So one of the really cool things that people like to do with these two books is they like to tandem read them. Now what that means is you literally read these two books at the same time. You read a chapter of this, and 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 you go back and forth until you've read both books in their entirety. I have actually never done the tandem read before, only because I didn't really know about it until after I had already read the series. I just read them in the order that they came out, so I just read Empire of Storms and then Tower of Dawn. But I have tabbed, there is an actual order, and so there's a list, which I can put up on the screen just so that you guys can see it. But there is an actual list of which chapters you should read in the exact orders. So you can tab your books, which I don't like my tabs to stick out very far, so you're barely going to be able to see the tabs in this. But I did tab each book so that they are tabbed at when you're supposed to switch to the other book. So I have all of my sections tabbed off. So I am currently doing another reread of this series, and I am on Queen of Shadows. So I think when I finish Queen of Shadows, I definitely might do a tandem read this time through, because how fun is that? I just didn't even know that that was an option when I read this for the first time. So just for an overview, because we named a whole lot of books in this series. So here they are. It goes Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, The Assassin's Blade, Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, Empire of Storms, Tower of Dawn, and Kingdom of Ash. This series is probably my favorite series of all time. I love this series with all of my heart. There are characters in this series that I hope one day we get to see their own stories and we get their own books. I mean, Sarah J. Maas has always said that technically it's a finished series, but that doesn't mean she can't jump back in and write more about a different character. And I would love that. I have so many characters, but there's a couple that come to mind first and foremost that I would just love to get their full story, and just getting their own book would be really, really cool. So I love the series, highly, highly recommend, and I recommend reading this after you've read A Court of Thorns and Roses. This series is also a lot less romance driven and a lot heavier on the plot. So this series is just, it's got a lot less fluff to it. And it's a lot more political and very, I don't know. I feel like that's probably the best way I can describe it. But it's fantastic, and I couldn't rave about it enough. All right, last but definitely not least, we have Crescent City. This is her latest book or book series. This is her third book if you're counting them chronologically. This is the Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood. Then we have Crescent City, House of Sky and Breath, and Crescent City, House of Flame and Shadow. I have also read all of these, and this series is very, very different. And I always like to start when I talk about the series by emphasizing that it is very different than A Court of Thorns and Roses and Throne of Glass. Those two series feel very similar. It feels very seamless to jump from one series to the next, almost like they're in the same world, but they're just different characters, although they're not. They're in different worlds in the same universe. And it's the same with this. This is a different world in the same universe, but this is a very urban feel. It's a very techie world. It's very new age. This is a new adult series, so it's a little bit more harsh on language, and it's just written a lot different. It's definitely written for more adult age than the other two. The other two are very much like young adult, just borderlining into new adult, and this one is definitely new adult into adult. And not specifically because of any like sexual content or anything like that in particular, although I do think that there are some scenes in a couple of them, maybe in all three of them. I don't really remember. These books are massive. They are so huge. But more in the writing style, in the characters themselves. The characters in these books are older. It's just more mature content. That's just the best way that I can put it. So this series, there is only one way to read them. There's no other way, and that is first House of Earth and Blood, right? Yes, House of Earth and Blood, then House of Sky and Breath, and then House of Flame and Shadow. Where this series comes into the reading order is, I believe, always third. I would say always read A Court of Thorns and Roses, especially A Court of Thorns and Roses. Definitely read that series before you read this one. But honestly, I would save this one for last in general. I would read it after Throne of Glass as well. I just think that it really should be read last, although it's not like you're gonna get any Throne of Glass spoilers or anything by any means. But I can see that, Sarah J. Maas is weaving threads between all of her worlds, and it just, again, hits a more emotional impact if you've already read both of these series. I keep saying both of these because the other two are right here on the floor. But it just definitely hits a greater emotional impact if you've already read the other two series before getting into this one. But like I said, if you're really, really wanting to read this series and you aren't sure on the other two, they can be read as standalones. It's not like you're going to be missing information and you're going to be confused. That's not it at all. This is its whole own world, so it is very different characters, all very different. But I would just say, personally, for emotional impact and everything, I would definitely read this series third. And like I said, this one is very, very different than the other two, but I love it. It's definitely not for everybody. I've heard a lot of people now that I've talked to that love A Court of Thorns and Roses and Throne of Glass say that they're just not a big Crescent City fan, and that they struggled to feel attached to the characters in this book. I thought that this series was her funniest series. We had a lot of really funny characters in this one. So the other two were quite serious. And I mean, this one is too, but this one also was really funny. There are scenes and characters that I know still to this day. Like, there's parts that actually make me laugh out loud, and I love that. I love how goofy some of these characters are, especially, this is in no means a spoiler because she's right in the beginning, but there's a character in the very beginning of the series. Her name is Lahaba, and she's a little fire sprite, and she's really sassy and really funny, and she cracks me up so much that, like, whenever she's in a scene, I just know that I'm gonna be laughing. She's really goofy and funny, and I love that. I love that about this series specifically. So that is pretty much all I have to say on reading order for all of Sarah J. Maas's books. So if you have any other questions, I would love for you to put them down in the comments. I can always answer any questions that have to do with the Sarah J. Maas universe at all. Obviously, like I said, I've read all of these books. So if you have any questions or anything, please let me know. If you have any other videos that you would love me to make in regards to a specific series or anything Sarah J. Maas, just let me know in the comments. I would be happy to talk more about Sarah J. Maas. I love her very, very much. I am a huge fan of hers. I think that she is quite an amazing author, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will see you next time. Bye.